Sometimes a girl just wants to say the quiet part loud. I want to get serious and permanent revenge on my ex, and that's exactly what SZA does all over her second incredible, sprawling, and audacious album, SOS, which I think is a complete and total shoe-in to win Album of the Year at the 2024 Grammys. SOS is the second studio album following SZA's essential debut record, Control. There was a 5-year gap between these two records, and SOS is this incredible experiment and a challenge to her listeners' taste. Just how many iterations of SZA and her psyche can we endure? We have rock SZA, indie SZA, pop SZA, R&B SZA, soul SZA, melodic rap SZA, you name it, she does it. Many SZA listeners, I think, were a little suspicious that this record would even come to fruition after years of false starts and delays. The first iteration of this record was likely derailed due to the pandemic. She had begun teasing the follow-up in January of 2020, and well, look how that turned out. But this did definitely turn out to be a blessing in disguise, because the global pause forced her to go inwards and excavate the deepest recesses of her mind, to chart her growth and her maturity, and also her setbacks, with startling honesty in the intervening period. So in case you're new here, my name is Zach. I'm the Swiftologist. I make thoughtful weekly videos about pop culture. We are right at the end of Grammy month, where I have made a video essay about each of my favorite albums that are nominated for Album of the Year. So we started with Olivia Rodrigo's Guts, Lana Del Rey's Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard, and Taylor Swift's Midnights. And now I'm talking about what I think is probably the most likely and deserving to win entry this year in the category, which is SZA's SOS, of course. Over 50% of you that watch my videos are not subscribed, so, I've been working really hard this month delivering this thoughtful content to you. So please make me happy and subscribe to my channel. But something that I found that was really interesting when I was doing my research for this record was learning a lot more about who SZA is as an artist and what her relationship is like with her label in particular. SZA's temperament as an artist really reminds me of Lana Del Rey, and I will definitely touch on that later. But her relationship with Top Dog Entertainment, particularly with its CEO Punch, is certainly a love-hate kind of situation. The way that SZA was found or discovered as a young artist is one of those kind of like mythological origin stories. She was dropping something off to Punch, who was already managing some other big artists, Kendrick Lamar most notably at the time. SZA was listening to herself in her earphones, and he said, "Who are you listening to?" And she was like, "That's me." And that's how it all started. This is literally like, it's basically a meet cute or a Disney Channel movie, the plot of that. What's interesting about this love-hate relationship that Punch and SZA have is that I think each party has at one point or another blamed the other for the delays in the birth of SOS, or the bungling of its rollout, which is an extremely contentious issue among both SZA, Punch, and her fans. SZA described this record when she was promoting it compellingly to me as unisex, and I think I can kind of get what she means here. I felt like Control was a deeply feminine record, and I do feel that there's an even split of masculine and feminine energy on this particular effort. SZA's never been this impatient and this dispassionate and cynical, but she's also right where we left her on Control, overthinking those tiny moments of insecurity and wallowing in the volatility of her malfunctioning emotional compass. This record sprawls, it luxuriates, it takes its time to announce and explain itself, mirroring the creative process of its creation, excising the bumps in the road and just leaving these wonderful lingering pauses between the old SZA and the new SZA, who hasn't quite yet appeared in a fully formed thought, but she's taking her time to arrive. There is no rush, there is no pressure, and that is entirely the point of this record. All the petty shit aside, all the phony shit aside, I just want what's mine. She bellows on the crest of a wave in the album opener and title track, SOS.
All the petty shit aside, all the funny shit aside, I just want what's mine.
SZA's taste is unparalleled and unmatched, which is why she's remained such a dominant cultural influence in music, despite not releasing a full-length project in 5 years. That SOS was whittled down to these 23 masterpieces from over 100 options is a testament to her prescience as a curator. As I mentioned earlier, I think her chances are pretty damn good this year at winning the big award. This is a singular album, and she is a singular nominee. Some might say a shoo-in for the big win. Now, if you've been following my videos for this month, you will know that I have 3 kind of categories that I have been assessing all of these records on: artistic excellence, so how has the artist grown, developed, changed, or evolved with this iteration of their music; cultural impact, what was the music received like, how well did it chart, that's not the most important thing, but it is something to consider; and also what was its legacy, how will this album be remembered. And I think that SZA meets all of these categories with flying colors, and I think the most important thing to consider in any of these categories is, of course, artistic excellence, because this is supposed to be an industry voted award. It's supposed to be a curation of the best in releases. And, you know, it rarely ever works out that way, but when it does, I think people are very happy and willing to receive the artist. So let's start with SZA's artistic excellence. I think we have to go all the way back to the beginning of making this record because, like I mentioned to you, there is a very interesting process, and I want to unpack that a little bit because I think it reveals a lot about who SZA is as an artist and the way in which she works. So SZA and Punch had both been hinting at the second record in 2019. Control came out in 2017, just for the record, and she was repeatedly saying that new music was coming soon, and from her perspective, this was always true. It seemed that there was a political element to her creating and releasing or not releasing from within the label itself. Punch and SZA are both, from my assessment doing the research for this, extremely messy and emotional. They've both at various times taken to Twitter to publicly goad the other person into responding in the midst of a breakdown in their personal communications. This in general, I would say, is not good. You should really keep the mess behind closed doors. You know, we don't need to be bringing the behind the scenes nonsense to the world stage. But I think a lot of this stems from the fact that SZA is a perfectionist. And actually that's really putting it mildly because SZA is actually neurotic about her work. Even after her songs have come out, she'll have her label issue minor tweaks to streaming services. Once the songs have been out for like a couple days, even a few weeks, if it's not to her liking, she will, you know, kick up a fuss until it is exactly right. And this commitment to her own standards of excellence has at times, I think, probably made her a very frustrating artist to manage. She's incredibly sensitive. For the SOS listening sessions, she had Punch host them and screen the feedback before giving it to her because she was so anxious about the critical response. I think the pressure also of it being long overdue and pushing back the deadline so many times, I think that was kind of getting to her as well. In an interview with Variety this year, where Punch was named the Executive of the Year in the music industry, he described his relationship with SZA as such. She is her own toughest critic. It's my job to reaffirm to her why this record is amazing. According to him, he will be the fall guy and the punching bag for SZA when her fans aren't happy with her or her release schedule. She herself often says, ask Punch why something hasn't come out yet when her fans start badgering her. And his perspective of like, I'm happy to be the fall guy kind of contradicts how messy he is. If he's so happy to be the fall guy, why are you arguing with stans on Twitter? Don't you have a job to do? I mean, go do the job, right? Go help SZA make the music that needs to be released. I think SZA felt that SOS was done and ready to go in the summer of 2022, and Punch told her that it needed to be moved until the top of 2023, and this really upset her. There's actually some footage of this.
And nothing had ever done that before. Everything's done. The album art is done. The cover art is done. The vinyl pack is done. The merch is done. Everything, the music is done.
The exact circumstances of the delays in SOS coming out are extremely hard to parse given that each party has blamed the other at various different moments. But what we do know is that the final product was definitely worth waiting for. And I think SZA and the collaborators on this record would now agree that it was kind of worth taking that extra time to let the pressure of a deadline bring good stuff into the fold. Many of the album highlights were actually recorded under time pressure with those looming deadlines in 2022. But nevertheless, it's not like she was unproductive between Control and SOS. She continued to stay at the forefront of mainstream consciousness with smart and tactical features. All of the Stars, heard of it, Kiss Me More, Grammy award-winning song. I think the Doja collab was especially clever because SZA is actually a very funny songwriter, and like Lana, this often gets lost in the intense vulnerability of her more emotionally complex writing. I guess our very first unofficial taste of SOS was the release of Good Days at the very end of the Hit Different music video in 2020. I remember thinking Hit Different was a bit of a stumble. I mean, do we really need to have Ty Dolla $ign on a song in the 2020s? I don't think so, but I was instantly enchanted by Good Days. It's not even really that similar, but it definitely reminded me of how I felt when I heard Supermodel for the first time. The production has this like weightless, airy quality that feels like walking back out into the daylight after being in a dark room for a really long time, and it feels like the perfect bridge between Control and SOS. This track was co-produced by Carter Lang, who worked pretty extensively with SZA on Control and who has more recently collaborated a lot with Omar Apollo. And she's dealing with a classic SZA dilemma on this song. How can I try to be happy when it feels like the world is closing in on me, when there is so much light around me? Why can I only focus on the darkness? All the while, I'll await my armored fate with a smile, still want to try, still want to believe in good days. They're always inside, they're always in my mind. There is something very devotional in her delivery of this song. It's like she's making a promise to herself to to believe in a good day, even when she can't possibly imagine one. Then after this song, we had the incredible I Hate You, which was originally released anonymously on SoundCloud. And the song was so good that it simply took on a life of its own with zero promotion. And I think what's amazing about SZA in general is that no matter how hard she or her label tries to fumble the bag when it comes to putting a record out and giving it a good shot at succeeding in this world, the quality of the music and the organic interest of the public in SZA's artistry is so high and so excellent that it takes off regardless. They literally had to put I Hate You on streaming because of how viral it was going on TikTok. The song was also co-produced by Carter Lang and the Neptunes. It's your classic F-off song to a really irritating ex. Used to be non-violent till you ambushed me. Love it, queen. It's an electro R&B song with a truly impeccable flow, and the way SZA's delivery just melts between melodic rap and the most gorgeous, hooky, jazz, scatty vocals. It's brava, it's bellissimo. It's the SZA sauce. She is the master of a chill banger. Her producers on I Hate You also noticed that the way that SZA works is rather magical and very similar actually to how rappers write when they're in the studio. I think the co-producer of this song watched her scrolling through her phone very nonchalantly, and then all of a sudden she said, I've got it. And she cuts an entire track. And this also happened with Kill Bill. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But she says that she doesn't really write with topics in mind. And that actually also reminds me of Lana and her automatic songwriting that we talked about with songs like Fingertips on Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard. But SZA also doesn't play an instrument like Lana. These melodies that SZA is so known for and what is so distinctly her just kind of burst out of her in the studio. And we get a preview of what we can, I suppose, consider to be the album's lead single, Shirt, at the end of the Good Days music video. There was a hard visual pivot that was genius here from that like bright and airy and very like ecological, feminine, divine nature woman into something a little bit more sinister and a little bit more impactful. Shirt is very referential to 90s R&B, and it was produced by one of the tastemakers and producers of that era, Rodney Jerkins, aka Darkchild. You may know him from hits such as Say My Name by Destiny's Child.
Say my name, no one is around you.
This song also trended on TikTok before it came out. Legendariness. You know what's really fun and interesting about this song? SZA's take on the bad bitch genre is always infected with something a little bit more dark and more serious than the I feel and look amazing and you will be amazed by me and I'm bulletproof and nothing can stop me and I've never felt insecure a day in my life. Shirt is an anxiously horny missive and a very sensual ode to seething. SZA stews and schemes. In the dark right now, feeling lost, but I like it. Feel the taste of resentment simmer in my skin. It's all about the blood stain on my shirt, the new bitch on my nerves. I think that Shirt is almost like a bit of a prologue to Kill Bill. And speaking of the HBIC, why don't we address her? This is probably one of the lyrical highlights on this record. It's deadly serious and deeply hilarious. The comedy, the absurdity of casually contemplating murdering your ex and his new girlfriend, juxtaposed with the troublingly real experience of if I can't have you, no one should. I'd rather be in jail than alone. This is what makes SZA one of the smartest and most cutting lyricists of our time. She can really toggle between the absurd and the hyperreal with the same agility that animates her voice flitting between gorgeous vocal runs and barbs of melodic rap. Kill Bill leans more into her pop inclinations, following a more traditional song structure with a very present hook, in a way that much of this record, and indeed most of Control, doesn't. This lyric and melody flowed right out of her. In the span of 10 minutes, she heard a beat and she sang the words, I just killed my ex, and the rest just flowed to its natural completion. She felt like it was really silly and she hated this song at first, but I was reading in an interview that she said she's often found that her biggest successes come from the songs where she's most spontaneous and off the cuff. It's never the songs I pour my soul into that end up doing well, she said. We can definitely see her mastery of these more formulaic pop songs in the cross-genre moments on this record, Nobody Gets Me, F2F, and Kill Bill. Part of SZA's artistic excellence is her deliberate challenging of the modern segregation in the music industry. Although SZA is proudly and lovingly a maker of black music, as she calls it, she resents being categorized purely as an R&B artist. In an interview with Consequence, she said, I feel it's super disrespectful to be pegged as an R&B artist. I don't want to be put in a box just because I'm black. I hate that. With songs on this album, it's supposed to help round out the picture and round out my story. She views it as lazy on the industry's part to just categorize her in R&B. She went on to say in this interview that black music doesn't just have to be R&B. She says, we started rock and roll. Why can't we just be expansive and not reductive? She's very careful, though, while she's saying this, not to deride R&B R&B, and she also notes that there are many Black artists like Summer Walker, for example, who are making R&B or soul music exclusively, and they are happy with that and really good at it. But she's also very clear to say, that's not my goal. Benny Blanco stated that the production choices that SZA made and the versatility of her writing was super risky and unexpected of her by her label. He said she can do everything: country, pop, rock, all of it. Her music taste is also super eclectic, and when I went on to learn a little bit more about the music that she surrounded herself with growing up and that was in her home, I started to understand how this very, very unique and singular artist came to be. She describes herself as a child of Good Charlotte, Fall Out Boy, Blink-182, and Limp Bizkit. She heard this music at school in the suburbs, where she often felt like one of the select Black people at her school. I think she was surrounded by a lot of white boys, hence the interest in that specific kind of music. But her sonic influences at home were jazz and experimental music from her father, and this is a direct influence that we can hear in her melodic structures. And she got a hip-hop influence from her sister and listened to a lot of church music with her mother. So all these inspirations have really cooked inside of her and have created this completely singular artist. So those are her sonic influences, but what's really driving her pen? So far we've talked about the more shocking songs. I'm murdering my ex, I'm wearing a bloodstained shirt, I'm feeling apathetic towards the future, but it's her vulnerability and her willingness to go there and say the quiet parts loud, or to spotlight the humiliating thoughts we all try to push away even in private, that makes our listening experience with her even more singular. You know, sometimes when you're just minding your own business and you're having a normal day and you remember that one small social interaction from like 5 years ago that makes you want to pour bleach in your brain, that is kind of the space that SZA is always trying to inhabit when she's writing a song. She said, I try to think of what I haven't said or what I'm hiding. I can tell what I'm hiding from myself or in general, and then I try to say that, whether it's a BBL, this is something that she admits to on the title track, or an embarrassment about my ex, whether it's shame, whether it's insecurity. That's the only way I can stay not bored, is to do these bizarre acts of self-embarrassment. What's so interesting about her approach to vulnerability as a writer is that it's almost anthropological in its tone, like she's a field researcher studying these volatile, humiliating emotions and experiences and just simply reporting back on what she's found. And I think this is what makes her a great artist. Anyone can be vulnerable. I talked about this a little bit at Midnights, the difference between diaristic and confessional songwriting, but it's not easy to sift through the vulnerabilities that you've identified and dial down on the ones that are most creatively stimulating. She toggles between, look at me, I'm doing so much better than you, and this very kind of desperate, hard to look away from, doe-eyed confession of need. The worst thing in the world that you can imagine when you're trying to move on from an ex, or maybe this is just because I'm a Scorpio, is confessing just how badly that you miss them. And yet SZA takes the humiliating private wallowing of that feeling and she yells it out loud on the album highlight Nobody Gets Me. We get imagery of her fighting and acting the fool in the MGM lobby in Vegas while devotionally wondering, how am I supposed to let you go when I only like myself with you? If I'm real, I deserve less. If I was you, I wouldn't take me back. These are thoughts for the therapy couch, not for your ex to hear on the world stage. But a great artist works from their innermost suffering and crisis. That is what we're seeing on this song and throughout SOS in general. We have her kind of presenting the opposing view to this on Gone Girl, whereas on Nobody Gets Me, she's the forlorn clinger. On Gone Girl, she's cool and detached. She needs more space and security. She needs your touch, not your scrutiny. I tried to erase, I lived to escape. She's describing this mental block between her insecurity and true intimacy, because to let someone in, you have to really open yourself up. And what we can see here is that she's not willing to do that with this person. The juxtaposition between this flippant, rather cold narrator and the yearning, sincere crooner on Nobody Gets Me is a real treat to behold. SZA is everything. And another moment of vulnerability that I felt was really poignant on this record is Special, which is sequenced right after a track called Conceited. I wish I was special. I gave away all my special to a loser. I used to be special, but you made me hate me. Regret that I changed me. I hate that you made me just like you. This is like the convergence of reflection and accusation. It's beautiful, and I can really hear the hurt in her voice while she's singing it. Let's talk about the cultural impact and legacy of this record. SZA's talent is otherworldly, but you just might know someone a little like her too. It might even be you, said Pitchfork's review of SOS, and I wholeheartedly agree. The magic of SZA as a public figure is how much of a raw and open nerve she is energetically as an artist, and she really reminds me again of Lana Del Rey in this sense. They're both very dismissive of criticism, and they try not to allow it to affect their art, but they also kind of preempt criticism by creating art that will surprise their critics and write responses to their criticisms in their work. I think with Lana, we can see this very clearly on songs like Grandfather, Stand on My Shoulders, etc. Lana's talking talking about the media's perception of her as a manufactured industry plant. For SZA, we can see this preemptive defensiveness by, very consciously focusing on making art that will surprise her critics and not allow them to genre define her. And both of these girlies also respond very poorly to criticism when it manages to filter through their way. But again, I don't think you have to be good at taking criticism as an artist. You just have to be receptive to it, because a lot of the times you may respond to criticism out of a place of hurt, but something slips through the cracks and gets through. And most artists have critics out there that are not afraid to critique them. Not all artists, but most. SZA is described by Punch and many of her producers as being rather flippant and moody. Again, very Lana Del Rey. In an interview with Consequence, the writer literally noticed that SZA's position on any given issue changed based on how she was feeling, and this could happen from moment to moment. She might say, "I hate being perceived," in one breath, and "I love being on tour," in the next breath, saying it's the most magical feeling in the world. And being on tour is like where you are literally more visible and perceived than ever before, directly contradicting the idea of not being perceived. But this is the duality of a true artist. We love a messy queen. And obviously we've talked about the birth of this record before. It was, in short, a mess, but it's such a cogent and coherent thought and a real considered work that one has to believe that despite their squabbling, Punch and SZA have a very magical creative collaboration, a creative friction, if you will. Again, her answer to his involvement on SOS, including on whether it was positive or negative, will change depending on the day, but she has said most recently the fact that SOS is an idea or a message of any kind is mostly down to Punch, who she says is more into, and this is a direct quote, telling a specific type of story, more linear and more literal. And she says this in kind of a derisive way and says that her process is more about just feeling, but that's where the dream team works. I think she knows when to hand over what she's good at, which is creating the music, being the artist, intuiting the feelings, and handing it over to someone who is good at a part of it that she may not necessarily be involved in, which is the handling and packaging of a record for sale and success, the marketing and messaging of it all. Punch really kind of pulls his weight in that respect. I think he was very involved in the visual directions for the tour specifically, but that's not to say that there weren't any blunders in the release of SOS, because her label released a bunch of stuff throughout this era without SZA's knowledge, which is kind of crazy. But overall, I'd say there's definitely a good yin and yang going on between these two characters. The imagery for this record is really, really stunning. The album cover was inspired by that iconic Diana sitting on a diving board image. SZA is sitting basically lost at sea. She's isolated. Her hair is flowing around her in these majestic waves. She's shrouded in a hockey jersey, staring determinedly into the horizon, not into the lens. I think there's a lot to unpack here, like metaphorically in this image. She's looking into the horizon, the future. She's betting on her talent and her progression. She's allowing the light of fame and celebrity to wash over her and light her from the side, but she's remaining focused on the true north, which is being an artist. The rest is just kind of, an added bonus or just a medium or a means to communicate her message. SZA is also underrated as an extremely visual artist, in my opinion. I think she's a bit of a nerd as well. Like, she is very, very referential when it comes to creating things. And on the visuals for this record, she pulled a lot of inspiration from her favorite film directors and musicians. For example, the styling throughout the album packaging I think is very Aaliyah coded, and she also worked with Dave Meyers, who was a super iconic music video producer who did Mary J. Blige's Family Affair, Aaliyah's last music video before she passed, Missy Elliott's Work It, etc. And with him, she drew in a lot of Tarantino influences. She's a huge Quentin Tarantino fan, and she was very inspired by his action sequences in Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill for her videos, Shirt and Kill Bill, obviously. But she did most of her own stunts, I believe, in the Kill Bill video, which is really cool. She's committed to the bit. And then we have her slow life depicted on the epic and visually stunning Dream of Snooze, famously co-starring Justin Bieber. She's smoking up with him. Benny Blanco's eating fries with ketchup off her ass. Brava. It's excellent. Visually, SZA is also a shapeshifter. And I think that this is another very important part of her artistry. The SZA vibe is kind of hard to pin down in words, but you just know it when you see it. And it has certainly evolved and changed over time as her work has expanded. She deliberately switches up her self-presentation, siren thirst trap in the Snooze video, emo sad girl on the Nobody Gets Me video, to keep people guessing and to give herself the freedom to reiterate. Here's a quote about her shapeshifting that I really liked. "I think people want to see me with my ass out and being hyper feminine, and then they're like, oh, we know what this is and we like this, but when I revert to hockey jersey SZA or I revert to baggy clothes on SNL SZA, I'm not really sure. I don't know. I prefer that people don't know what to make of me because I just want to be myself without any expectations. And the best way to do that is to keep shapeshifting aggressively and often, sonically and otherwise." This album album, despite not really having a clear hit immediately upon its release, debuted at number 1 on the Hot 100 with 318,000 copies sold in its first week. It stayed in the top spot for 10 weeks, and it became the longest running number 1 album by a woman in the 2020s, and the first R&B album to reign at the top for this period of time since Mariah's debuted self-titled record in 1991. It also broke records for the biggest streaming week for an R&B album and the second largest streaming week for any album released by a female artist last year. The singles Kill Bill, I Hate You, and Snooze have been enduring chart hits with a lot of rhythmic and pop airplay, clocking a handful of top 10 singles and a number 1 with the instantly iconic Kill Bill. Snooze peaked at number 2, robbed, to be honest, if we're being real. To say this record was met with critical acclaim as well is an understatement. The industry loved this. It was universally beloved, and rightly so. Nearly all of the reviews point to SZA's singular influence and impact on pop music and her genre fluidity between R&B, hip-hop, and pop, citing her as a trailblazer whose stylistic flourishes and experimentations have exposed R&B light to a wider audience, modernizing the genre even further with her early adept use of the mixtape format and free distribution platforms like SoundCloud. Control is also widely considered to have been snubbed at the 2018 Grammys, absolutely, given how influential it was and how beautifully formed of a debut it had been. Some reviews that I really liked of this record, Variety magazine said that SOS is a record meant to be heard in its entirety. It would have been entrancing, surely, at double the length. And I thought this was extremely notable because you very rarely hear critics asking for more, especially from an album this long. It's 23 tracks. The New York Times said, with 23 songs, SOS arrives as a long, nuanced argument SZA is having with her companions and with herself. The songs leap from personal beefs to universal quandaries, while SZA challenges herself as both musician and persona. And the LA Times said, in its emotional sprawl, not to mention its diverse assortment of styles, from dusty soul to throbbing trap to trippy psychedelic rock, SOS evokes natural memories of the miseducation of Lauryn Hill and Beyonce. From a voting perspective, I think that SZA and Boy Genius are probably best poised to get the votes required to actually take home the trophy. Now that there are more entries in the category, I think it makes it harder for artists in the same genre to get enough votes to win. All Grammy members can vote for the big categories. Album of the Year is a big category, but when it comes down to it, voters do tend to go with their genre. So if you're a pop writer, you're probably going to vote for a pop album. And we've got 3 pure pop entries this year: Guts, Midnights, and Endless Summer Vacation. And you know what? Tunnel probably falls into that category too, whether you like it or not. It is technically classified as a pop album. Janelle Monáe's Age of Pleasure is an Afrobeat soul record, and SOS is R&B, and The Record by Boy Genius is rock. So I think that they're the 2 frontrunners given the critical acclaim. They're also probably least likely to be impacted by vote splitting. If anything, vote splitting would work in one of their favors. What do I think the legacy of this record is going to be? I think that SZA has done something genuinely new and innovative and trailblazing here. I think the legacy of SZA's SOS is probably going to extend a lot to young Black female artists, and maybe also just young Black artists in general. Because of the modern segregation in the music industry, it can be very frustrating and difficult to try and aim for something larger than a genre category, or to, be recognized outside of very specific, almost segregated fields. And SZA's experimentation on this record, showing that you don't have to do a hard pivot away from the music that you want to do, while also holding space for other things that have influenced you or have been interesting to you throughout your life. To be a fully holistic and realized artist, I think, is a privilege that Black artists are not afforded as much as, white artists or other artists that are not subjected to maybe more stereotypical groupings or decidings of who can do what kind of music, who's allowed to be a front runner in a category, for example. And I think that SZA's fluidity and her adeptness and her skill at inhabiting all of these different things while still being true to herself is very commendable, and I think is something that we're going to respect and appreciate for years to come. And I can't wait to see what SZA does next. We are waiting on the reissue of this record. It's going to be called Lana. Her full name is Solana, if you didn't know. And that has been delayed multiple times. She said that she probably has enough to put out a new album now. And to that I say, I would like to see it. Leave me a comment and let me know what your favorite tracks from SOS were. Do you think it's the front runner for Album of the Year? Do you agree with me? What do you think is really going to win, realistically? Let's talk not about what you want to win, but what you think is going to win and why you think so. And, thank you so much for tuning in for Grammy month. I may just squeeze out a Boy Genius video. Probably won't, but we'll see how I feel. I'm kind of ready to do something a little bit silly, something a little bit, for a kiki. I'm done with being so serious for the last couple of weeks. And, there's going to be a lot of, nonsense coming up because the Eras Tour is coming. I will be doing a Grammys reaction. So I'll be doing that live on Twitch, twitch.tv/theswiftologist. I'm doing my last hurrah on Twitch. I will stream the entire Grammys. If you miss it, don't worry. I'm going to chop it up and post it on YouTube. But if you are free and you want to watch the Grammys with your trusty Swiftologist, then that's where you can find me. It's free. I'll be there. You can come and hang out with me. I'll have the awards on the screen so you can watch it. You don't have to open a separate stream, but it should be a really fun time. And yeah, I want to thank you guys so much for being so open and receptive. I think that this month has been super fulfilling for me creatively, and it was a real challenge to get out there and do an in-depth analysis of different artists going beyond Taylor Swift. So I hope that you liked it, and I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.